Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince has long been regarded as one of the most controversial and influential political works in history. Its blunt, often ruthless advice for rulers made it both a timeless guide to statecraft and a lightning rod for criticism. In 1539, the work was condemned by Reginald Pole, who declared Machiavelli the enemy of the human race. His philosophy, which suggested that rulers should abandon moral considerations in favor of pragmatism, was deemed morally bankrupt, painting Machiavelli as one of history's most ruthless figures. At the heart of Machiavelli's advice was a stark rejection of traditional moral values. He proposed that rulers focus not on what is morally right, but on what is most effective in achieving their goals. For Machiavelli, this could mean resorting to deceit, violence, or manipulation if necessary to maintain power. He famously argued that the ends justify the means, suggesting that rulers could at times even massacre entire families or use deception to secure the state. In essence, Machiavelli's political philosophy reduced human life to a pragmatic pursuit of power, without regard for conventional morality. Yet, beneath this grim outlook on politics lies an uncomfortable truth about human nature. Machiavelli exposed the harsh realities of power dynamics that many would prefer to ignore. Though his methods seem cold and calculating, his teachings offer insights into the darker side of leadership, insights that can be applied not only to politics but also to various fields where power, success, and survival are at stake. Machiavelli was born on May 3, 1469, in Florence, Italy, during a time of political instability and violence. Italy was not the unified country we know today, but a patchwork of city-states, each vying for control. Florence, Venice, Milan, Naples, and the Papal States were in a constant state of conflict, both among themselves and with foreign powers like France and Spain, who sought to dominate the Italian peninsula. Violence was an integral part of life. In Florence, the Medici family, rulers of the city, were expelled in 1494, leading to a brief and chaotic republican government. Machiavelli, a young man at the time, witnessed the intense factionalism between powerful families and the mercenary, armies that fueled the chaos. The instability of this period greatly influenced his views on power, leadership, and the methods a ruler must employ to stay in control. In 1498, Machiavelli's political career began to take shape after the execution of the Dominican friar Girolamo Savonarola, who had briefly ruled Florence. Savonarola's leadership, marked by strict religious reforms, ended abruptly with his public execution. Machiavelli, now 29, emerged from obscurity to become the head of the Second Chancery in charge of foreign affairs. It was during this period that he began to observe firsthand the brutal realities of power and governance. The broader context of Machiavelli's life was shaped by the Italian Wars, which raged between France, Spain, and various Italian city-states. These wars brought devastation, economic hardship, and political upheaval, leaving a lasting impact on Machiavelli's understanding of political power. The fall of Florence in 1512 to the Medici family led to Machiavelli's political downfall, resulting in his torture and exile. This experience shaped much of his later work, particularly The Prince and discourses on Livy. Machiavelli's views on power and human nature were informed by his harsh experiences in the political turmoil of Italy. He came to believe that people were inherently selfish, hypocritical, and driven by their own self-interest. In his view, human nature was not governed by lofty ideals or morality, but by the brutal realities of survival. This disillusionment with human nature was reinforced by the figures of his time, particularly Pope Alexander VI, who epitomized political hypocrisy. Pope Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, was notorious for prioritizing his family's ambitions over his spiritual duties. His papacy, marked by deception and nepotism, was a clear example of how political power often came at the expense of moral integrity. Machiavelli observed this behavior and concluded that morality and politics were frequently incompatible. For Machiavelli, political success depended on a ruler's ability to exploit the darker aspects of human nature. He argued that a ruler must assume the worst in others to avoid being blindsided by betrayal. In his mind, power could only be maintained by understanding and manipulating the base instincts of those in society. A ruler who trusted others too easily, Machiavelli believed, would ultimately be vulnerable to the machinations of those around them. Machiavelli famously stated, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." This sentiment underscores his belief that a ruler must surround themselves with competent and loyal individuals to ensure the stability of the state. Yet Machiavelli also acknowledged that not all men are virtuous, and in certain situations, harsh measures may be required. One of Machiavelli's most famous assertions in The Prince is the question of whether it is better for a ruler to be loved or feared. He famously argued that while it would be ideal for a ruler to be both loved and feared, if forced to choose between the two, it is far safer to be feared. Love, in Machiavelli's view, is fickle and unreliable. It can be lost as soon as a ruler's subjects feel their own needs are no longer being met. Fear, however, is much more enduring. Once instilled, fear remains in people's hearts, compelling loyalty even in difficult times. Machiavelli's analysis of fear versus love was grounded in his understanding of human psychology. He believed that people, by nature, are self-interested and driven by their own desires. As soon as those desires are no longer satisfied, their affection for their ruler can easily dissipate. Fear, on the other hand, is much stronger because it doesn't rely on the ever-changing emotions of love, but on the more stable and enduring instinct for self-preservation. Machiavelli cites the historical example of Cesare Borgia, a ruthless ruler in Italy, as a model of fear-based governance. Borgia's use of fear and violence helped him unify the region of Romagna and prevent rebellion. His methods were harsh, but they proved effective in maintaining his power. Machiavelli's philosophy here is clear. To maintain control, a ruler must be willing to impose fear and punishment when necessary. This is the foundation of his argument that the security of the state is the ruler's paramount concern. Machiavelli's emphasis on fear and the use of extreme measures to maintain control is perhaps best encapsulated in his statement, "People should either be caressed or crushed. If you do them minor damage, they will get their revenge. But if you crush them completely, there is nothing they can do." This sentiment captures the essence of Machiavelli's political philosophy. The ends justify the means. In his view, the preservation of the state must be the ultimate goal of any ruler, and if harsh measures, including cruelty or deception, are necessary to achieve that goal, then so be it. Machiavelli's perspective on power is unapologetically pragmatic. He believed that the use of cruelty and fear could often be justified if it served the greater good of the state. This harshness is not about mindless tyranny or capricious violence, but about securing the ruler's position and protecting the state from internal and external threats. For Machiavelli, any action that safeguarded the state, no matter how ruthless, was acceptable. This viewpoint is deeply rooted in his view of human nature. Machiavelli saw people as inherently selfish and driven by their desires. As a result, he argued that a ruler must be prepared to manipulate and even deceive those around them to maintain control. The ruler must understand the darker side of human nature and be willing to exploit it when necessary. Perhaps one of Machiavelli's most famous metaphors is the advice that a ruler must embody both the qualities of a fox and a lion. In his metaphor, the fox represents intelligence, cunning, and adaptability, while the lion symbolizes strength, power, and the ability to intimidate. A successful ruler must be able to recognize hidden dangers and traps in the political landscape, like a fox, while also being capable of using force when necessary, like a lion. Machiavelli's notion that a ruler must embody both traits reflects his pragmatism. He understood that not all political challenges could be overcome by brute force. Sometimes deception and subtlety were required to navigate complex political situations. However, there were also moments when decisive action was necessary to crush any opposition. The best ruler, according to Machiavelli, would know when to use each of these approaches. A balance between cunning and strength was key to preserving the state. In this context, Machiavelli stresses that a ruler's ability to use manipulation, deception, and fear when appropriate was more important than adhering to any traditional moral code. He believed that in the realm of politics, the successful ruler must be willing to set aside conventional notions of good and evil and act in whatever way is necessary to maintain power and protect the state. Machiavelli's political philosophy is fundamentally pragmatic. He believed that a ruler must be flexible and willing to take extreme actions when necessary to secure power. His ideas radically separated politics from morality, rejecting the notion that rulers should be guided by religious or ethical principles. In The Prince, Machiavelli openly challenges the idea that rulers must govern according to traditional moral codes. Instead, he argues that the state's preservation is paramount and should take precedence over religious or ethical concerns. This separation of politics from morality was one of the reasons The Prince was so controversial. Machiavelli rejected the common belief that rulers should govern with a sense of justice or piety. Instead, he saw the ruler's primary duty as maintaining the stability of the state, no matter the cost. For Machiavelli, the end always justified. The means and the preservation of the state was the ultimate moral imperative. Furthermore, Machiavelli's views on morality were shaped by his understanding of human nature. He argued that people are inherently selfish, deceitful, and driven by their own desires. This belief led him to conclude that rulers should never rely on the goodness of others, but should instead assume that others are plotting against them. To succeed, a ruler must be willing to act decisively, even if that means abandoning conventional moral principles. Machiavelli's influence extends far beyond the political landscape of his time. His ideas about power, leadership, and human nature continue to resonate in modern politics, business, and leadership theory. Though often criticized for their harshness and cynicism, his teachings provide a stark but honest analysis of how power functions in the real world. Machiavelli's work is still studied in political science and leadership courses today, and his ideas are applied in both public and private sectors. His emphasis on pragmatism, adaptability, and the strategic use of fear and manipulation has found a place in contemporary leadership models. However, his rejection of morality and emphasis on ruthlessness have also led to debates about the ethical implications of his philosophy. While Machiavelli's ideas were deeply influenced by the political instability and constant warfare of Renaissance Italy, his lessons on power and human nature remain relevant in any era. Leaders who ignore the darker aspects of human behavior or fail to adapt to changing circumstances risk losing their power and authority. The lessons from Machiavelli's The Prince remind us that, in the harsh world of politics, survival often requires actions that go beyond the traditional boundaries of ethics and morality. Machiavelli's The Prince offers a sobering, often unflattering view of human nature and political power. His philosophy is grounded in the belief that politics is a ruthless game, where morality must be set aside in favor of pragmatic and effective strategies. Though his ideas may seem cold and even cruel, they provide a clear-eyed view of how power operates in the real world. While Machiavelli's teachings may not offer a moral blueprint for leadership, they offer a practical guide to achieving and maintaining power in a world where traditional moral values often clash with the demands of survival. His work remains a critical, if controversial, part of political discourse, challenging us to confront the harsh realities of leadership and power. Ultimately, Machiavelli's legacy is one of realism, an acknowledgement that power, in its most unvarnished form, is often achieved and maintained through methods that transcend the traditional moral compass. Whether you view his ideas as cynicism or wisdom, they force us to ask the difficult questions about how power should be wielded, and what, if anything, should be sacrificed to secure it.